The words hit me like a slap across the face. Her voice echoed through the living room, sharp, possessive, trembling with a kind of anger that didn't belong to her. And for a second, I just stood there, my hands frozen in midair, staring at the woman who was now standing between me and the home I had built, brick by brick, memory by memory. Her name was Nadia, my son's wife, my daughter-in-law. But in that moment, as sunlight poured through the sheer curtains and dust swirled in the air between us, she didn't feel like family. She felt like a stranger guarding something that was mine. It wasn't just the furniture she didn't want me touching. It was the life I once had a hand in shaping, the family I raised, the son I sacrificed everything for. I remember clutching my handbag tighter, feeling the leather bend beneath my fingers. I wanted to speak, to remind her who I was, but my voice caught in my throat, because deep down I already knew. Something had changed long before this moment. I just hadn't wanted to see it. The normal life/setup. Before Nadia entered our lives, everything in that house had a rhythm, small, simple, predictable. Morning started with the smell of tea leaves simmering on the stove and the faint hum of the ceiling fan that had been there since my late husband's time. I'd open the curtains in the living room, letting in Karachi's bright, restless sun, and sit near the window with my prayer beads. My son Adil would usually join me, sometimes half awake, hair messy, shirt buttoned wrong. He'd mumble, "Ammi, ekar cup chai bana do," and I'd smile, pretending to be annoyed but already reaching for the kettle. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I had sold my jewelry to pay for his university fees. We lived in a small two-bedroom house in North Nazimabad, old but ours, the kind of place where every crack in the wall told a story. Adil was my only child, my pride. His father had died when he was 11, and from that day, I promised myself one thing: my son would never feel the emptiness I did. So, when Adil graduated, got a job at a construction firm, and later announced that he wanted to buy a bigger home, I felt fulfilled. Like all those nights sewing clothes for neighbors or skipping meals so he could have more, it had all been worth it. The house we bought wasn't huge, but it was beautiful. A corner plot with a small front yard, white marble floors, and a balcony that caught the evening breeze. I put my entire life savings into it. Literally. The papers even had both our names, his and mine. When we moved in, I spent weeks decorating it, choosing curtains that matched the walls, setting up the old family photos, keeping the same copper kettle on the stove because it made the new house feel like home. Then one day, he brought her home. I remember the first time I met Nadia. She came in wearing a bright yellow shower camise, her laughter filling the house before she even stepped inside. Adil's eyes sparkled when he looked at her, that kind of soft, protective gaze a man gives when he's already made up his mind. She was polite at first, called me Ammi, brought me mithai, and even helped in the kitchen. I wanted to like her. I truly did. After all, every mother dreams of seeing her son's home filled with laughter again. But slowly, things began to change. It started with small things. She replaced the living room curtains I had chosen with ones she said were modern. She rearranged the kitchen cabinets because she didn't like old-fashioned setups. And once, when I tried to hang my husband's picture on the wall, she said softly, "Maybe we can keep this one in your room, Ammi. The living room should feel new." I told myself it was normal. Every new bride wants to make a home her own. I smiled, nodded, and swallowed the unease growing inside me. But Adil, he started changing too. He used to call me every afternoon from work just to check if I'd eaten or if I needed anything. Now, his calls grew shorter, his tone more distant. When I tried to talk about it, he'd say, "Ammi, you're overthinking. Nadia just wants us all to be comfortable." So I said nothing. I convinced myself I was imagining it. That maybe, after all these years of living just for him, I didn't know how to share him with someone else. Still, I couldn't ignore the way she'd sometimes glance at me when I sat on the sofa, that faint irritation, as if I was sitting where she didn't want me to, or the way she'd whisper to Adil in the hallway, stopping abruptly when I walked by. One evening, I overheard her say, "Adil, we can't live like this forever. We need our own space." And he replied softly, "We'll figure it out." I didn't ask what that meant, but something inside me knew. The walls I had built with love were starting to crack. A few weeks later, Nadia told me they wanted to renovate the house. She said it so casually, while stirring sugar into her tea. "Ammi, I was thinking we should repaint the living room and maybe change the furniture. It'll make everything look fresh." I smiled politely. "That's fine, Beta, but these things cost money. Maybe we can plan it next year." Her spoon stopped mid-stir. She didn't look at me, just said quietly, "Adil already agreed." That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard noises from the living room, furniture being moved, laughter, the faint sound of a drill. When I stepped out, she turned sharply and said the words that would haunt me for months. "Don't touch anything." And there I was, standing in the middle of my own house, feeling like an uninvited guest. The next morning, I noticed my old sofa, the one I bought when Adil was a child, was gone. In its place stood a sleek, gray sectional, cold and foreign. The walls were being painted a pale beige, erasing the warm yellow I'd chosen. Even the prayer rug from the corner was missing. When I asked about it, Nadia said, "Oh, it didn't go with a new color scheme. I put it in storage." Storage. That's what my memories had become. And as I stood there watching strangers paint over my life, I realized something I never wanted to believe. It wasn't about renovation. It was about removal. The days that followed were heavy, not loud or dramatic, just quietly cruel. The kind of pain that doesn't come from shouting matches, but from the slow erasure of everything you once called home. Every time I walked through that house, I noticed something missing. A vase here, a photo there. My late husband's armchair, the one that used to creak when he sat down, vanished overnight. When I asked to deal, he looked away, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he didn't want to talk. Amy, we wanted to make some space, he said softly. For what? I asked. For the new things, he replied, still not meeting my eyes. The new things. Those words echoed through me. That evening, I found my old photo frames, wrapped in newspaper, and shoved into a cardboard box near the storeroom. I touched the glass with my fingertips, tracing the faces. Adil at 5 years old, holding a wooden toy truck. My husband, smiling in his worn-out white kurta. I pressed my lips together, swallowing the ache in my chest. I wanted to scream, but instead, I sat quietly and prayed. A few days later, things got worse. I came home from visiting my friend Shanaz one afternoon and found my room door half open. Inside, my neatly folded clothes were scattered across the bed, and my old wooden dresser, the one my father gave me as part of my dowry, was missing. I walked out, trembling. Nadia! She was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. Yes, Sammy, she said without looking up. Where's my dresser? Oh, she replied casually. I told the carpenter to take it. We're getting new built-ins. Modern ones. Adil said it was fine. Her tone was so calm, so matter-of-fact, it almost made me question if I was overreacting. But I wasn't. That dresser had been in my life longer than she had been alive. I walked to my room again, staring at the empty wall where it once stood. That's when I noticed even my prayer beads were missing from the bedside table. It wasn't just furniture she was removing. It was me. That night, I sat by the window, watching Adil park his car. He came in smiling, kissed Nadia on the forehead, and greeted me with a tired, "Assalamu alaikum, Ammi." I looked at him, really looked, trying to find the boy who used to chase kites on our old rooftop who'd once told me, "One day I'll buy you a big house, Ammi." But all I saw was a man torn between love and guilt. "Adil," I said softly, "do you know they took my dresser?" He sighed, placing his hand on my shoulder. "Ammi, please, it's just furniture. Don't make it a big deal." "Furniture," I repeated, my voice shaking. "Adil, that dresser was for my Nika. Your father's picture, your childhood certificates, everything was inside that." He looked away. I'll find out where it went, but I knew he wouldn't. He didn't want to pick a side, so I just nodded, tears threatening to fall. And as he walked away, I whispered to myself, "You already have." The first clue that something even deeper was happening came a week later. I overheard a conversation, not intentionally, but the walls in that house were thin. Nadia was talking on the phone, her voice low and impatient. "Yes, I told him already. Once it's transferred, we can list it. He just doesn't want to upset her yet." A pause. I know, but she won't understand. She still thinks it's hers too." I froze. My heart began to pound. Transferred? Listed? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, the same one that had followed us from the old house, the only thing they hadn't yet replaced. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I made parathas, set a table, and smiled as if nothing was wrong. But my mind was racing. When Adil left for work, I went to the small wooden drawer near the kitchen, the one where we kept all our important papers. And there it was, the house file. I flipped through the pages, title deed, payment receipts, and then a new document, a transfer form, with my signature printed at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature. It was forged. My hands went cold. My breath came out in short, sharp bursts. I sat down on the floor, the tiles cool against my palms, and tried to steady myself. They weren't just changing the house. They were taking it. When Adil came home that night, I waited for him at the dining table. The document lay in front of me. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice quiet but trembling. He blinked, confused. "Ammi, what are you doing?" I asked where you got this. I pointed at the fake signature. He looked at Nadia, then back at me. "Ammi, it's just paperwork. For the loan." "Loan," I repeated, my heart tightening. "Adil, this is a transfer deed. You're selling the house." His jaw clenched. He looked at Nadia again, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. "Adil," I said, my voice cracking, "I gave my whole life for this home. Every rupee I saved, every sacrifice. How could you?" He interrupted, raising his voice slightly. "Ammi, please. You don't understand. We needed money for the business. Nadia's been helping manage everything. It's temporary." "Temporary," I whispered. "You forged my name." Silence. The kind that stretches, suffocates, and fills every corner of a room. Nadia finally spoke. "Ammi, it's not like that. We'll buy another house. A bigger one. You'll have your own room again." I turned to her slowly. "This house is my room." For the first time, I saw fear flicker across her face. Not guilt, but fear. Because she realized I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. That night, I packed a small bag. Not because I was leaving, but because I wanted to remind myself I could survive with little. I'd done it before. As I folded my shawl, I whispered to the empty room, "You may take the house, Nadia, but you'll never own what built it." My hands trembled, but my heart felt steady for the first time in weeks. Because now, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds outside hadn't begun their chatter yet. I sat on the edge of my bed, the faint smell of paint still lingering from Nadia's renovations. The air felt heavy with something unspoken, something unfinished. I looked around my room, once warm and filled with framed memories, now bare and pale like a stranger's guest room. Only one thing remained untouched, a small tin box under my bed. Inside were my old documents, the original purchase papers, stamped and signed. My name was right there beside Adil's, written in black ink, proof that I hadn't imagined it. That house was mine as much as his. I ran my fingers over the paper, then folded it back carefully. No, I thought, I will not be erased quietly. Later that day, I went to see an old friend, Shanaz, the same one I'd visited before. She lived just a few blocks away, in the same narrow lane where the houses leaned close together like gossiping neighbors. When she opened the door, I didn't even have to speak. She saw my face and said, "Who hurt you, Sakina?" I sat in her living room, the smell of cardamom tea filling the air, and told her everything. Every word, every scream, every paper signed behind my back. She listened quietly, her eyes hardening with every sentence. When I finished, she took a deep breath. "You need to act fast," she said, "before they finalize the sale. Go to the registrar's office, file a complaint. You still have time." I hesitated. "I don't want to send my son to court, Shanaz." She leaned forward. "You're not sending your son to court, Sakina. You're protecting what's rightfully yours." Her words stayed with me all the way home. And that night, as Adil and Nadia sat watching television, laughing at something I couldn't understand anymore, I decided tomorrow I would fight back. The next morning, I took out my old shawl, pinned it neatly, and left the house before they woke. The streets of Karachi were already alive, horns blaring, vendors shouting, sunlight bouncing off the glass of rickshaws. But inside me, everything felt still. At the property registrar's office, the clerk looked at me over his glasses. "Madam, this is a serious matter," he said after hearing my story. "I know," I replied, clutching my papers tightly. He flipped through the documents, frowned, and said, "This signature, it's not identical to the one on your national ID. We can verify it officially. If it's proven forged, the sale can't go through." I felt my throat tighten. "So I can stop it?" He nodded. "If you act now, yes." He gave me a form to fill out. My hands trembled as I wrote my name on the paper. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some power again. When I returned home that afternoon, Adil's car wasn't in the driveway. Nadia was in the kitchen, on the phone again. Her voice lowered when she saw me. I walked past her quietly, went to my room, and sat down with a calmness that surprised even me. For hours I waited. When Adil finally came home, I called him into my room. "Beta, sit," I said softly. He sat down, cautious, like a child about to be scolded. I took out the documents, the originals, and placed them in front of him. "Adil, I went to the registrar's office today." His face drained of color. "Amy, you shouldn't have done that." "I had to," I said. "You left me no choice. This house is not just yours. You signed my name without my consent." He rubbed his forehead. "Amy, I didn't mean to hurt you. We were desperate. Nadia's business idea needed capital. You thought you could fix everything with lies?" I interrupted, my voice breaking but firm. "You thought your mother's home was a loan office?" He looked at the floor. His silence was louder than any apology. "You know," I said quietly, "I used to pray every night that Allah would bless you with success. But now I see some blessings come with blindness." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "Amy, please, we'll fix this. I'll cancel everything." But before he could speak further, Nadia walked in. Her voice was cold, controlled. "Adil, stop apologizing. We did what we had to." She wouldn't have understood. I turned to her slowly. "What wouldn't I understand, Beta? That you're trying to sell a house I built with my husband's death insurance. That every tile here was paid for with my blood and my sleepless nights." Her eyes hardened. "We just wanted our own life, Amy." I smiled sadly. "Then build it, but not on my bones." That night, the tension in the house was thick. Adil barely spoke during dinner. Nadia ate in silence. And me, I just watched, memorizing everything. The way she avoided my gaze, the way he fidgeted with a spoon. By morning, I knew what I had to do next. I went back to the registrar's office with my verification form. They compared my ID signature with the one on the deed. The result was immediate. Forgery confirmed. It was enough to halt the sale process entirely. The clerk handed me the stamp notice. "You protected your share, madam. They can't sell the property without your consent now." As I held that paper, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, peace. When I came home that evening, Adil was sitting alone in the living room. He looked tired, defeated. "Amy," he said quietly, "I canceled everything. You were right. I shouldn't have done this." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to remind him of every night I'd stayed hungry so he could eat. But instead, I just sighed. "You made a mistake, Beta. Not because you wanted money, but because you forgot who you were doing it for." His eyes welled up. "I'm sorry, Amy." For a moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who used to hide behind my dupatta after breaking a glass. I placed my hand on his cheek. "It's not too late to fix your heart. Just don't let anyone else break mine again." But Nadia, she wasn't done. The next day, she came to me, her face pale but her tone sharp. "I hope you're happy now, Amy," she said bitterly. "You've embarrassed us. Everyone will know what you did." I looked at her quietly. "What I did, I protected what's mine, Beta. What you did was betray someone who called you daughter." She scoffed, tears brimming in her eyes. "You'll never understand. I did everything for a deal. For us." I sighed. "Maybe, but love built on someone else's tears never lasts." She turned away, muttering something under her breath, and I realized she wasn't angry because she'd lost the house. She was angry because she'd lost control. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The house felt lighter somehow, as if it had exhaled after holding its breath too long. In my dream, I saw my late husband smiling at me from across the courtyard, his voice gentle and proud. And when I woke, I whispered a small prayer of thanks. Because this time, I hadn't just saved the house. I had saved myself. Peace didn't last long. It never does when guilt and pride live under the same roof. After the forgery was exposed, word spread faster than I ever expected. It wasn't me who told anyone. It was the clerk's assistant, who also happened to live 2 streets away. By the next Friday, the whispers had begun at the mosque and in the market. Did you hear? Sakina's son tried to sell her house without telling her. Allah forgive him. What's happening to children these days? I didn't want that kind of attention. But once gossip starts, it grows like fire. When Adil came home that evening, his face was pale. "Ammi," he said, dropping his keys on the table. "Everyone knows. My boss called me in. He said I need to sort my family issues." His voice trembled, not from anger, but humiliation. And yet, all I could feel was a strange calm. Because for once, I wasn't the one being silenced. "I told you, Beta," I said quietly. "The truth has a way of walking out on its own." The next day, Shanaz came over, bringing kokoris and sympathy. She sat cross-legged on the floor, shaking her head. "They're talking about it everywhere, Sakina. But don't let it shame you. You did the right thing." I smiled faintly. Right and easy rarely sit together. From the other room, I could hear Nadia talking on the phone, her voice sharp, defensive. "No, it's not true. Of course, I didn't forge anything. Why would I? It's her word against mine." Her tone wavered, though. I could hear the crack in her confidence. Later, when she came out, she tried to act normal. But her eyes were swollen from crying or anger, I couldn't tell. She didn't say a word to me that day, but I could feel her silence pulsing in the air between us, thick, heavy, poisonous. By the following week, everything began to unravel. Adil was suspended from his firm. They said it was a temporary leave until his name was cleared, but I knew what that meant. The bank began calling about the loan they had taken, the same one Nadia had convinced him to apply for. I watched quietly as the cracks widened between them. One night, they argued in the living room. The walls couldn't hide their words. "You said it would work out," Adil shouted. "And you said your mother wouldn't be a problem." Nadia shot back. "She's my mother. You went too far. I did it for you, Adil. Everything was for you." Then came the sound of something breaking. A glass, maybe. And silence again. I sat in my room, eyes closed, praying for Allah to give them both sense. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But sometimes, peace only comes after everything else is burned away. A few days later, I heard a knock on my door. It was early morning, too early for visitors. When I opened it, Adil stood there with a small suitcase beside him. His eyes were red, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ammi," he said, "Nadia's gone." I froze. "Gone?" He nodded. "She left last night. Took her jewelry, her things. Said she can't live here anymore. Said she deserves a man who stands by her, not his mother." I stared at him, searching his face for bitterness or relief. But all I saw was emptiness, the kind that comes after love has curdled into regret. He sat down at the edge of the sofa and buried his face in his hands. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "I tried to keep everyone happy and I lost it all." I walked over and placed my hand on his shoulder. "You lost what wasn't meant to stay, Beta. But you still have what never left." He looked up, tears glistening. "You still forgive me? After everything I did?" I smiled, not out of joy, but out of something deeper. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting Adil. It means remembering without hate. He nodded slowly, his shoulders trembling. And in that moment, I saw my son again. Not the man chasing status or money, but the boy who used to bring me chai with too much sugar and say, "Taste it, Ammi, I made it myself." The following weeks were quiet. The whispers died down. The house was still. Adil started looking for smaller jobs, helping at an architect's office. He'd come home tired, sometimes silent, but always respectful now. He'd knock before entering my room. He'd sit with me during dinner. And once, I caught him standing by the prayer mat after far, hands raised high, asking for forgiveness in a voice that cracked halfway through. That sound, that trembling, broken sound, healed something in me I didn't know was still bleeding. One evening, I was watering the plants on the balcony when I noticed him repainting the living room wall. The one Nadia had changed to beige. I asked softly, "What color are you painting, Beta?" He smiled faintly. "Your favorite one. The old yellow." The sunlight caught the wet paint, glowing warm and familiar. It looked like home again. Then one night, as we were sitting together after dinner, Adil said, "Ammi, I've been thinking. I want to transfer your name as the sole owner of this house. I don't want there to be any more misunderstandings." I looked at him quietly. "Beta, it's not about ownership. It's about honor. You can't sign that away." He lowered his eyes. "Still, I need to make it right." And he did. A week later, we went together to the registrar's office, the same place where everything had begun. This time, when I signed my name, my hands didn't tremble, because I wasn't defending something anymore. I was reclaiming it. When we got home, Adil turned to me and said, "Ammi, I want to thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For not hating me. For teaching me that love isn't about control. It's about patience." I smiled softly. "And for teaching me," I replied, "that motherhood doesn't end when a child grows up. It just changes shape." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Maybe one day I'll be worthy of that kind of love." I reached over and touched his cheek. "You already are, Beta. You just forgot for a little while." And in that small, quiet living room, painted yellow again, smelling faintly of fresh tea and paint, I realized the house had never truly belonged to me or him. It belonged to the memories we made inside it, the arguments, the forgiveness, forgiveness, the silence that healed more than words ever could. It wasn't the walls I had fought for. It was our bond. And this time, I wasn't going to let it crumble again. Months passed. The seasons turned, as they always do, quietly, without asking permission. The garden bloomed again that spring. Jasmine climbed along the gate, and the scent of it drifted into the house every evening. I began to cook again, not out of duty, but out of peace. And Adil, he changed. He wasn't the same man who once measured success in cars, phones, or flashy guests. Now, his pride came from smaller things: fixing a leaking tap, helping the old man next door with groceries, bringing home fresh naan for me every morning. He even started tutoring neighborhood children in architecture basics on weekends. Maybe, he said one day, if I help someone else build their future, mine will make sense again. And I thought, maybe that's what healing looks like. Not grand apologies, not dramatic endings, just small, consistent acts of kindness. One evening, we were sitting on the veranda, sipping chai as the sky turned soft orange. He said, Amy, I saw Nadia last week. My hand froze midair. You did? He nodded slowly. She came to the office. She wanted to collect some of her documents. She looked different, quiet, maybe even sorry. I didn't ask what they talked about. I didn't need to. Did you forgive her? I asked gently. He looked out at the sunset. I don't know if I can, but I don't hate her anymore. I smiled faintly. Then you already have. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting someone's wrong. It's about freeing yourself from carrying it. That night, I prayed longer than usual, not for revenge or justice, but for peace in all our hearts, for the lessons that came wrapped in pain, and for the strength to stay kind, even when life isn't. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. I received a letter, an actual letter, not an email, not a message. A folded piece of paper with my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in months. It was from Nadia. She wrote, Amy, I don't know if I deserve to call you that anymore, but I still think of you that way. I'm sorry for the things I said, the things I did, and the ways I hurt you. I thought love was about winning. I thought being a wife meant having control. But I see now that I lost everything that mattered because I didn't understand respect. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want you to know you were never my enemy. You were my mirror. You showed me the parts of myself I didn't want to face. I hope Adil finds peace, and I hope you keep blessing him the way only a mother can. I read it twice, then 3 times. The ink had smudged in places, maybe from her tears. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her, only sadness, because sometimes people realize the truth only after they've broken everything around them. I placed the letter in my Quran, not as a memory of pain, but as proof that even the hardest hearts can soften. Life found a rhythm again. Every morning, the sound of the azan drifted through the window, soft and familiar. Adil would wait before me, prepare breakfast, and call out, Amy, chai ready, hi. Sometimes I'd smile and think of the years when I did that for him. How life comes full circle when we least expect it. On Fridays, he'd take me to the park after Jumma prayer. We'd sit under the big peepal tree, watching children play, listening to their laughter echo across the grass. He once said, Amy, I used to think strength meant never needing anyone. But you've shown me that real strength is staying soft in a hard world. I looked at him and said, and real manhood isn't about power, Beta. It's about protection. You can't protect what you try to own, only what you respect. He nodded slowly, like he was etching those words somewhere deep inside. Then, one evening, about a year after everything happened, he came home with a small gift box. Open it, he said. Inside was a silver locket, simple, with tiny engravings along the edge. When I opened it, there was a picture of me and him from years ago. I was holding him as a toddler, both of us laughing, his hair messy and his eyes full of joy. I looked up, tears welling. Why this now? He smiled softly, because I finally understand what this picture means. You didn't just raise me, Amy. You helped me out, even when I was the one pulling you down. I reached for his hand, squeezing it. A mother's arms don't let go that easily, Beta. He smiled. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to hold me up alone again. Sometimes, when I sit alone in the evenings, I still think of everything that happened, the betrayal, the humiliation, the long nights of prayer and tears. But now, when I think of it, I don't feel bitterness. I feel gratitude, because pain became my teacher, and forgiveness, my freedom. I learned that love isn't about control. It's about patience. That children don't stop needing their mothers when they grow up. They just forget how to say it. And that even broken families can bloom again if the roots, the love, were real. A few weeks ago, Adil got a new job at a firm in Lahore. It was a big step, and I could see the excitement in his eyes, mixed with fear. He said, Amy, the new job will need me to move for a while, but I'll come every month, I promise. I smiled. Go, Beta. Build your life. I'll be right here when you come back. He hugged me tightly, longer than usual. And before leaving, he looked around the house one last time and said softly, this place, it's not just home, Amy. It's where I found myself again. When he drove away, I stood at the gate, watching his car disappear around the corner. The same corner from where he once used to return every evening, carrying guilt and silence. Now he left carrying purpose. And I stood there, hand raised, whispering a prayer that every mother whispers when her child walks away. Ya Allah, protect him and bring him home safe. That night, the house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. The walls glowed softly under the yellow light. The jasmine outside swayed in the breeze. And for the first time in years, I felt peace, not because everything was perfect, but because my heart had stopped fighting fighting itself. They say, home isn't where you live, it's where you're understood. For a long time, my home was filled with noise, arguments, and unspoken pain. But now, it was filled with something else. Stillness, grace, love that had been tested and found its way back. And maybe that's what life is really about. Not about avoiding storms, but learning how to stand through them with your faith as your shelter and forgiveness as your umbrella. Because in the end, the people who hurt us aren't our enemies. They're our teachers. And the pain they bring isn't punishment, it's preparation. Preparation for the kind of peace you can only earn through heartbreak. So if you ever find yourself fighting for love, respect, or truth, remember my story. Remember that silence can protect you as much as words can. That forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. And that sometimes the house you save isn't made of walls. It's made of hearts. Hearts that learn, break, and heal all under the same roof. Sparkles. And in the quiet of my home, beneath the soft hum of prayer and the scent of jasmine, I finally understood peace doesn't arrive when others change. It arrives when you do.